Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. Science fiction is supposed to inspire a better tomorrow, a better world in which things become easier and more efficient for the average man, thanks to advances in technology and our society. One way to immediately make everyone's life easier is by creating efficient and cheap public transportation. Here in the United States, there's plenty of space, and there's also cheap automobile prices and prosperity, so it's quite common for people to own their own private transport. But for most of the world, especially in dense urban populations in developing countries like China and India, the idea of owning your own vehicle is impossible, either financially or because there just isn't enough space or permit. And so most of the world actually depends on shared means of transport. And having good access to a well-designed and comprehensive public transportation network can greatly expand an individual's economic opportunities and how far one can travel to access necessary services. So today I thought it'd be cool to take a look at science fiction and take some of the best examples of public transportation and use that as inspiration for our own future. Well, actually, some of these are kind of stupid, so maybe not all of them. Minority Report and I, Robot, to a lesser extent, are seen as science fiction films that were way ahead of their times and made many accurate and bold predictions about the state of our future. Both of these films also came to the conclusion that humanity will eventually try to develop an automated driving system to reduce driver fatigue and mistakes and increase the safety on the road. But in both of these franchises, we don't just see new cars with sensors and AI driving brains. Instead, the majority of the changes lie in the actual road infrastructure itself. Instead of making the cars smart enough to drive on existing roads, large elevated highways were developed completely isolated from foot traffic and bicycle traffic, making it much easier for these automated driving systems to work properly. This is probably going to be a much easier solution than actually creating a self-driving car that is able to drive on the roads in their current condition today. Minority Report takes it a step further by creating vertical roads that lead directly to a person's apartment. Yes, in the future, apartment buildings will have cars driving on the side of them, and you'll have parking right in front of your window. The one thing that hasn't changed, though, is large freight trucks will still be a menace and try to kill you on the highways. Also, in both Minority Report and iRobot, there are still manually guided vehicles, and even, thank God, motorcycles. It seems like off the superhighways, people will still have to know how to drive themselves. They really didn't need to remake Total Recall, but I appreciated how they slightly altered the backstory of this film. Instead of having a portion of the story take place on Mars, in Colin Farrell's version of Total Recall, most of the world is destroyed by chemical warfare. Only the British Isles, now known as the United Federation of Britain, or UFB, and Australia, known as the Colony, are habitable. Factory workers from the colony need to commute to the UFB every day in order to work in the factories. Unfortunately, a direct flight between Australia and the UK is around 20 hours right now. And so the UFB decided to build a massive gravity-powered elevator through the center of the Earth. Now, clearly, this is form over function. This is a highly unrealistic, unfeasible, and impractical solution to essentially what is an employment housing issue. Your factory workers shouldn't have to travel from the other side of the world to go to work. But then again, that's the point of public transportation, like this gravity elevator. It takes a 20-hour trip and turns it into a much more feasible 17-minute trip through the core of the planet. In a country like ours that is wide open and mostly flat, alternative methods of travel, like high-speed rail, could be extremely beneficial to our country. With current high-speed rail technology, we could probably go from New York City to LA in just under 12 hours. Which for many might be a better option than the 6-hour or so flight. Elon Musk even predicted that one day a similar train trip through his Hyperloop tunnel will take only around 45 minutes, but I don't want to die. So why can't we have a bullet train that runs across the country? It would be better for the environment from an emissions point of view, and it would not only carry passengers, it would also carry freight as well. Plus, if enough people take this train, it should be considerably cheaper than flying people the same distance. In the world of Avatar, the RDA, that's the Resource Development Administration, actually starts off as a transportation company. They design and construct a railway that not only crosses the United States, but circumvents the entire world. This crazy infrastructure program really expands the distance the average human being can travel in a single day or a single commute. which ultimately gave people in more rural and developing areas access to job markets in more developed and rich areas. This was a hugely popular and successful infrastructure program that more or less united the world. Ad Astra was so meh, especially because I saw it directly after watching Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which was definitely one of my favorite movies in 2019. You know, when we actually had good movies. But there were some cool scenes in Ad Astra, especially when Brad Pitt leaves for his mission to the outer edges of our solar system. He ends up taking a commercial Virgin Atlantic flight to the moon. What's interesting about this scene is how it combines things we expect from the traditional space agencies with what we expect from commercial airline industries. You still have passengers going through the pre-flight tests to see if they're healthy enough to take on this journey. They'll take a look at your oxygen levels, organ functions, and also test your blood. Notice the large blood testing machines, by the way. There still are no tiny Theranos boxes in the future. Then we see Brad Pitt walk through a terminal, which is very similar to an airport terminal. It has gates and display screens showing his flight information. Once Brad reaches the spaceship, he's actually greeted by the pilot of the ship, which does occasionally happen on airlines where the crews are actually happy and well paid. All the passengers have their own spacesuits, and flight attendants hand out a vanity kit and help people get seated. Blankets and pillows are not included in the flight, and they cost $125, which is pretty much on par with how things are going with the airline industry and inflation. This film is supposed to take place in the late 21st century, so it seems about right. When the spaceship finally lands, we immediately see the commercialization of the moon. There's Yoshinoya, Emirates, Applebee's, and while Brad Pitt launches into his hipster tirade about how the moon was supposed to be a rugged frontier and not some overly commercialized Disney World attraction, we also get to see a few more retail stores in essentially what looks like an airport or a train system. Overall, I think it's a pretty cool and relatable look of what the moon base will look like in the future when we do have commercial flights available for people who can afford it. The Mon calamari are an aquatic species who live in shallow cities beneath the sea. In order to get around their cities quickly, there are tubes connecting many of the major areas of the city, acting sort of like roads and pathways. Using pressure, these tubes allow the Mon calamari to swim at faster speeds and go from point A and B in a much faster time. The tunnels were also a decent protection from sharks and other nasty critters. In a lot of ways, this tunnel system actually kind of reminds me of the vacuum tube transport system in Futurama. So there you have it, guys. 5 futuristic forms of public transportation. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about these, or maybe should we just give everyone private jetpacks and helmets so we can just fly around without having to be stuck inside of a little tin can with everyone else. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie and you are the protagonist.